Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover, and when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the custom. After they had completed its days as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, and his parents did not know it. Thinking that he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day and looked for him among their relatives and acquaintances, but not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" They did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Merry Christmas, everyone. It's still Christmas. Don't forget it. All right. Make sure you keep your Christmas decorations, your Christmas trees, and everything out for the rest of the Christmas season, because I will be watching. Christmas lasts. It lasts the 12 days of Christmas go until Epiphany. On the liturgical calendar, we go until the baptism of the Lord. In the olden days, some of you might remember, Christmas is supposed to go until February 2nd, actually, the Feast of the Presentation, right? 40 days after the birth of Jesus, right? So feel free to keep your Christmas decor up all the way until February 2nd, right? Christmas is an important season, and we should keep it going, right? Christmas is not ended. It has just begun. And on the first Sunday after the Feast of Christmas, we always have the Feast of the Holy Family, right, as a church. And it's kind of interesting because when we think about the Holy Family, right, I'm sure everybody, when you hear about the Holy Family, you probably think about your own family. Is your family holy? And I imagine that many of us, right, can be a little self-conscious of our families. Right? One of the things I hear the most about and people in spiritual direction and confession, things like that, is their anxieties over their family, their children, or their spouse, right, who's not practicing the faith, or at least not practicing the way that they want it. Right? Or maybe you're somebody who reflects on your family life as a child, and you think about how dysfunctional your family was, how unholy your family was. And I think it's consoling to hear in the gospel today that even the Holy Family, right, was far from perfect harmony. Right? Even though Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary, even though neither of them ever sinned, it's very possible that St. Joseph lived a very sinless life as well, but even then, there was still at times some disharmony within the Holy Family. We hear about the finding of Jesus in the temple today, how he was missing for 3 days and seemingly forgot to tell his parents. And his parents were very anxious. And even Mary was seemingly distressed about what had happened. So even the Holy Family was far from perfect. And yet, the reason why families are always far from perfection is because there's always a tremendous amount of love in every family. And so sometimes even the smallest things can be the most hurtful. And obviously Mary and Joseph were hurt by what had happened, right, with their son. So on this Feast of Holy Family, right, it's important to remember that. Right? When your family is not perfect, right, there's still hope for your family and for mine. And yet there's still some lessons we can learn on this feast of the Holy Family. What makes a family holy? I think the first lesson we can learn from these readings today is that the first step of a holy family is humility. I find it really interesting that, Christ is literally the creator of the universe, the God of all things. And the gospel today says that when he returned home to Nazareth, he was obedient to his parents. Imagine the God who created them was obedient, submissive to them, submissive to his creatures. I find it very interesting that Christ, when he was on this earth, he spent 30 years in humble obedience within his family before spending 3 years in ministry. When we think about our lives here on this earth, when we think about the way we interact at our jobs or in our schools, right, in your classes, right, on your sports teams, remember that. Christ spent 30 years in humble obedience and only 3 years as the one in charge, as the leader, as the one in the forefront. Humility should be at the heart of all of our lives. We can also learn other things on this feast of the Holy Family. What does it mean to be holy anyway? Holiness in the Bible, right, comes from a Hebrew word, kadosh, and it literally means to be set apart. To be holy is to be set apart. I think it's important that we remember that. Sometimes when we think about holiness, we think holiness means that we're perfect, like we never do anything wrong, we never commit any sins. And if that's what holiness means, then none of us will ever accomplish that. But holiness means to be set apart. Set apart for the mission that God has for us. Holiness isn't so much about avoiding ever committing any errors. It's about being intentional about your family being different and set apart. We read on this Feast of the Holy Family that every year at the Feast of Passover, for example, Mary and Joseph and Jesus, they would go to Jerusalem every year on the Feast of Passover. Not everybody living at that time would make that intentional trip, that intentional pilgrimage to go to Jerusalem. All of us who are here this morning, you are setting yourselves apart. Not everybody in Crawfordsville is in church today, but you are. Every time you come to Mass, it's a pilgrimage, a time you have set aside for God. What are the other ways within your family that you can set apart time for God? It's very difficult in our modern culture. Everybody's very busy, right, with sports and clubs and schoolwork. But what are some simple ways that you can set aside time for God? Maybe it's the one night a week that you're actually able to sit down and have dinner together. And how do you spend that time over dinner? You could read a chapter from the Bible together, or you could talk about how you're grateful for what God is doing in your life. You can talk about the ways that you've tried to spread the faith to other people. Holiness, we're set apart for a mission. It's not just being set apart to be well-behaved humans, right? It's for a mission. Do you talk about, as a family, how you are spreading the joy of Christ to others? Do you strategize? Do you talk about your times of victory in that regard? Do you challenge each other to be people who spread the joy of Christ to others? Do you think about how people perceive you at your school or in your neighborhood? Do they see you as an example of joy, of love, and thereby want to have what you have? Do you see yourself as a representative of the Catholic faith at all times? Do you see yourself as a sign of what St. Bernard Catholic Church means? When people interact with you and they know that you go to St. Bernard, right, what's their impression of the church that you go to? Do you spend your time complaining about the church? Or do you talk about it as something that is so immensely important to your life that they might want to join it themselves? Every member of our parish, every family, every couple, and their children, you're supposed to be like salesmen in the midst of Crawfordsville for the Catholic faith, champions of St. Bernard. As a family, how do you think about the parish? Do you see the parish as something that you just come and you passively receive from? Or do you see the parish as a place that you are obligated to help build up? So often people will talk about things that they like to see in the church, or differences or changes they would like to see. But they aren't exactly willing to be a part of that change. Many people have complaints about, the music or the youth ministry or any such thing. But what are you doing to actually try to make it better? Some people get discouraged when they're in a parish and they feel like, the parish is too cliquey or something like that, or they can't, they don't really like the environment or the culture of the church. Well, again, what are you doing to build up the culture? Do you show up at 9:29 and leave at 10:30 and not talk to anybody? Do you come to any of the events that the parish holds? To be a holy family means that you are a family that is set apart. You see it as your mission to spread the joy of Christ. You see your church not as just some place where you come to passively receive, but a place that is a part of your family, a second home, and you need to build it up. To be a holy family means that you are a family set apart, not a family that's perfect, but a family that is intentional about the mission of the faith, spreading joy to others, building up the local parish, setting aside a time for God, setting aside time for God to speak within your family. Mary, it says that when they found Christ in the temple, it says that she pondered all of these things in her heart. How much time do you spend pondering the things of God in your heart? As a child or as a parent, as a spouse, we all spend a lot of time in our lives thinking about, the things that we need to do in our jobs or the tasks or the chores at home. How much time do you spend discerning what God's trying to do with your family? What God's trying to do with your children, even your spouse. Sometimes parents will talk about raising children, and they'll talk about wanting their children to have every opportunity. They'll talk about protecting their children, and all sorts of different things, which are all very beautiful and good. But sometimes being a parent isn't just about protecting your child or helping them flourish. It's helping them to learn that they have a responsibility in this life. A responsibility to serve God. That everything they have is from God. Their whole existence on this earth is for the sake of serving God's plan. Do you instill that in your children? Is that how you think about your direction as a family, as a couple? To be a holy family is to be a family that is set apart, not perfect, but intentional about God's plan and the responsibilities of serving God as